Well, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to these beautiful premises at Grant Thornton. And I'd like to thank Ian and the team for hosting us here today. It's a wonderful meeting space. Before I do move on with the formalities of this afternoon, I'd just like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and to pay my respects to all elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to thank the Industry Leaders Fund for putting on this event, which Jeff tells me has been widely requested by ILF members for quite some time. So I think we've pulled off a bit of a coup when you look at the proceedings for today, that we are featuring quite a number of ILF scholars in the lineup, as well as some new colleagues in the group today. And hopefully all members that are available to be present do get something out of this afternoon. So Susie and Jeff, thank you very much for pulling this all together. I'd also like just to remind anybody that we are on someone else's business premises, so if there is an emergency, we all look to Ian and his team. Wave your hand, Ian. Thank you. But I'm told has fantastic emergency procedures in place, and we will take our direction from them. Restrooms, if you haven't already availed yourself of those, are back towards the lifts, but just before the lifts on your right-hand side, and feel free just to come in and out if you need to during the afternoon. We've got a reasonable amount of time sitting, so that's fine. You might be aware that we've got some miking and technology happenings going on as you start to see speakers come up to the podium and present, because we are, I'm told, filming this. So you'll see a bit of changing around with microphones, and occasionally I might get a wave to remind me to speak loudly, or I might have to encourage someone else to. So that's the reason for that, because we do want to be able to share some of the great learnings from today. So the lineup is pretty straightforward. In a moment I'm going to introduce Jenny Harvey, who's our first speaker, and I'm told Jenny is quite comfortable to take questions throughout her presentation. There will be some slides that you'll start to see with Jenny's presentation. So for those of you that haven't met Jenny, I'm not going to go right through her bio, but just to remind you that she's the Group General Manager of Human Resources at the Detmold Group, and most of you would be familiar with the Detmold company. The group is a leading manufacturer of paper and board-based packaging products, and is one of Adelaide's great success stories, as we well know. So Jenny has a great story to walk us through about the culture journey for their organisation and some of the interesting things that have occurred along the way. So please join me in welcoming Jenny.
Thank you, and thank you firstly to the ILF for inviting me to come and speak today. And I just want to acknowledge that we've had a fantastic relationship with Jeff and the ILF. We've been fortunate to have 3 scholars come through the program, and the returns that we get from that have been significant in the business. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Jeff. I'm hoping everyone can hear me, because I like to talk and walk rather than stay still. So if you can't hear me, please just signal and I'll speak a bit more loudly. The other thing is I can talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater. So if you see Christine do this at me, it means you're halfway through, speed up or whatever. I also do like people to interact and ask questions as we go, because when I look around at the group here, I think, how lucky am I to be the person doing the keynote address? And I'm just one story. And yet when I see, people have been to, I was just talking to 2 people before we started. They were talking about their journey at Stanford and at MIT. Others have been at Harvard, others have been at Wharton, let alone the Australian business schools that we have. So you don't need me standing up here lecturing to you about theories of culture change or engagement. And I'm not going to do that, you'll be pleased to hear. I'm going to talk about one theory that I tend to relate to, and I hope you'll get some value out of that as well. So, also of course thank you to Ian for hosting us here today. Now I do have a lot of PowerPoints. I'm not going to kill you with PowerPoint presentation. I just like to use them as prompts as we go through. So hopefully we're on. Let's see. We are. As I said, I'm not going to kill you with theory, because any of you have got your background from the business schools you go through, from the development that you do, I'm sure lots of you have done MBAs, etc. Everyone talks about theories of culture. And these days you can go online and you can find out anything that you need to know. So about, if you're an entrepreneur, the main thing you can control is culture. Your culture is your brand. culture is the shadow of the leader. And interestingly, we've just had all of our international top 40 leaders in this week. And every time we have them in, we talk, of course, about culture and leadership. And it was interesting, we talked about this, and this resonated with people, about it very much being the shadow of the leader. You know, lots of quotes that you can get. You can't force culture. You know, what's the role of the leader in culture? Your primary influences leaders. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You would have all heard this quote of operational excellence for lunch and everything else for dinner. All right? And of course, Timkins, I want a coherent new corporate culture that will take us into the third millennium, and I want it by this afternoon. Right? And I'm sure we've all heard that as well, because of course in the world of dynamic business, we all get impatient, don't we? Why aren't they? Why haven't they? And you know, they used to say, before things got even faster, that the culture of an organisation pretty much takes a tenth of its life cycle to change. And so it's good if you're a startup, means you can change it quickly. But you know, we just celebrated our 70th year for the Detmold Group. In fact, it's this year. So if you think theoretically, it takes 7 years to change a culture. And the journey that I'm going to take you through a bit later, we really started it in 2012. And it's still a work in progress. And so, you know, when you think about culture, I don't think the important question is what is culture? Because everyone can talk about, oh, it's the stories we tell, it's the feel, it's the myths, it's the, you know, whatever. The important thing to think about is what is your culture? What is it that you are wanting to shape? You can read everything about high-performance cultures, achievement-based cultures. There's all sorts of words around what is culture. But unless you actually define it for your company and about what does it mean to work here, then I think you're a bit behind the eight ball. If we're not clear as leaders, what is the culture we want to shape? How do we expect other people to align with it and to be on board with it? So think, you know, that's the starting point. What is your culture? And, you know, isn't it interesting when you think about the difference between national culture and organisational culture? And you'll see in a minute how many national cultures we have to work with, and I'm sure lots of you have to work with multiple countries and cultures. I know Christine does. And when you hear someone like Gandhi say that a nation's culture resides in the hearts and the souls of its people, and as leaders, are we tapping into that? And how do you do that? That's an old saying about, oh, you know, you've got to change the hearts and the minds and etc. But how do we really tap into it? And then if I look at, for example, you know, for our customers, and we do try and be very customer focused and customer centric. And so obviously Starbucks is actually, I'll show you some of our other customers. That's one of our customers. We have no patent on anything we do. Anything we do can be replicated. I know you're going to hear from Teamgate a bit later today, innovative startup company. You've got other entrepreneurs here. But eventually, we all know there's the first to market and then there's the fast second, correct? So anything we do can be replicated. You know, Starbucks, what do they make? You know, coffee. Lots of people can make a coffee, right? So what he says is, you can't copy the heart and the soul and the conscience of an organisation. That's what they aim for, to set Starbucks apart from their competitors. And then when I was, you know, just refreshing, thinking I should do a bit more reading, make sure I'm up to date, but I like to look at the stories as well rather than theories. And I read an interesting article by Chip Berg. It was actually in HBR. And he talked about his journey when he went in and took over Levi's. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. He got tapped on the shoulder, asked to go be the CEO. He thought, this sounds good. Levi's, strong brand, well-renowned, should be really profitable. Christine's shaking her head. No, really behind the eight ball. And he said the first thing he found when he went in there, they were all rowing in different directions. And this was him talking to the executive that he had. He was asking them, you know, what do you think our business is? How does your work, what you are doing, how does it contribute to the success of the business? And he said he just got a lot of blank stares. So of course, as a CEO, you're thinking, well, if my executive aren't aligned, how do you get the alignment through the business? And then the second thing he learned was, and you think he'd know this because he was an experienced CEO, it's very hard to change culture. You know, and it's just as well that it is, because then otherwise, you know, as HR practitioners or psychologists or, you know, people in change culture experts, we'd sort of be out of jobs. So it's lucky that it can be a challenge to do it. But he says it all starts with having the right people and helping them to unleash their talent in dealing with some of the biggest challenges in their organisation. So he spent a lot of time with his top leaders, really defining what does it mean, what are the expectations, how do we roll that through. And whether it's the good story or the bad end of the story, he changed about 80% of his leaders. So this is the one simple theory that I'm going to talk about today. And I'm sure everyone here in the room, do you all do lots of reading? Yeah, you know, you all get the alerts from the HBRs and all the different HRDs or whatever it may be, and you try and read snippets. And I remember, it was a few years ago, it was actually, I think, I won't say how long ago, a while ago. And I came across this book, and it was called Living Strategy, Putting People at the Heart of Corporate Culture by Linda Grattan. Has anyone come across it? Anyone come across her? Yes? Yeah. And so, of course, I'm a bit biased because I'm a psychologist. And she, at the time, was Associate Professor of Organisational Behaviour at London Business School. And, you know, I was actually running leadership programs in Asia at the time for ANU, so in one of my previous roles. And I was thinking, right, I want to do something new with how I'm taking them through the journey. And I picked up this book and I started reading it. And when I read it, I thought, this is a really good book. I don't quite understand it all yet, but I know I need to really think about this and absorb it. And, you know, I still pull it out and have a look at it. And she's gone on and done lots of other work and written lots of other books around culture and leadership. But first of all, she says, as an organisation, we operate in time. And sometimes we forget the time factor. We remember that it's dynamic, that our markets are changing, but we forget about what does that really mean. So the picture that I've got up there is two of our previous intakes of graduates. And they're talking with they're standing there with their mentors. And, you know, they brought a whole new dimension into the business. When they first came in after about, and they come out fresh from uni. With about 12 months into their program, we got them to present at our Senior Leaders Forum, where, as I said, we get about the top 40 people globally to come in. And, you know, they were so nervous, and they prepared and they rehearsed and they went through it with their mentors and they did dry runs. But they stood up there because we set what the topics were, and we got them to talk about what their experience had been coming into the business. What did they see? What was the feel? Was it what they expected? How much alignment were they seeing? And hearing their perspective of fresh eyes, fresh ears, the whole senior leadership team afterwards just walked away saying, we feel re-energised. They've brought something different in. They've taught us to look at it differently again. And that's just one element about how we operate in time. Are we keeping pace with the freshness, the newness coming through? Particularly when we're all so busy, we're all experienced, you know, we've done lots of things. Are we actually keeping our eyes and ears open to what happens with time? And then we search for meaning, and that's a picture of Alf, previous scholar, who had a fantastic experience thanks to the ILF. And that's at one of our senior leadership forums, and you can see there, I'll talk about this a bit later, that's one of the signs and symbols we have up around the place. So, you know, we try and all the time refresh, what does it mean? Where are we headed? How is our strategy changing? How is it evolving? You know, twice a year we go through that in a formal sense. And then we have a soul. And we were laughing actually when I did one of the presentations yesterday, because all the pictures that I had picked out of people, and you'll see a few more as we go through, hey, people doing this, or and I know it's quite an Asia thing, but the pictures as well of people in Australia are doing this, and, you know, And to me, that's part of it. That gives you a feel for what your company is. How, you know, when you walk into a business, like I'm sure when we all walked into these fantastic premises, it gives you a feel. Straight away, you make an interpretation about that business. And you know, even with our people, when we send them out to new customers, we say, even when you walk in the front door, what's the feel? What's the tone? When we interview people, we have candidates come in, they're met at reception, and we are a family-owned business. We're a pretty frugal business. So it's a very different feel, and we're a manufacturing business. So it's a very different feel when you walk into our front office. But, you know, I often talk to candidates about what was your experience when you came in? What did you notice? Or if we're interviewing people for operations roles out in our factory, once we get down to the people we think are the last one or two, we take them out into the factory and just do a walk around. But of course, when they come back in, what do you think I ask them? What did you notice? What did you see about comms? What did you see on the walls? What did you notice about the people? And I don't want them all to come back and say, oh, it's all wonderful. I want them to come back and say, you know what? That wasn't quite right, or I think we could do this. Because that's telling you about the feel and seeing how people interact and what's the energy you get from them. You know, we are a global company, and in Indonesia, it's a very difficult business, very difficult country to operate in. And we had all sorts of challenges that we needed to move through in Indonesia. And when I first started going there with Detmold, I've been there for 12 years now, and when I first started going there, you'd just walk into the factory and it was dull and it wasn't up to the standards that we wanted, and the people, you'd walk past, and what do you think the people out on the shop floor would do? Right, and I'm being honest telling you this. Now you go out, you walk out there. It's bright, it's got messages everywhere, all the key messages. You walk past people, they smile, even if they don't speak English, and you say, hello, how are you? They go. But they look at you, they engage with you. You get a sense of the feel. So to me, that's part of changing the feel of an organisation. And that's about saying, have we helped to develop a soul of a company and to change what that feel is? And I thought I'd help you out and put some of my lessons learned earlier, so that then if you want to sit and think about other things, you can, because you've got the lessons, you've got some of the takeaways, all right? And so, you know, to me, culture weaves through everything, all the time. And it's living and it's breathing. And if you think we operate in time, you think about change in your company, even people coming in and out, how hard you have to work to get people to align with your culture. So it's living and it's breathing. And if you take your eye off the ball, remember that, and I've got it in here as well, that if you don't shape it, it will shape you. And, you know, if I tell you, go back to that Indonesia example, we hadn't had a really strong leadership team there. And so what was happening was that really strong militant unions were coming in, and the people were aligning with the unions. So that was shaping our business. And so we had to do a really focused, long-term strategy. And now we've got very low union presence, and they align with us. But it takes that time. Be clear in what you want it to be, because if the message isn't clear, you can't expect people to align. You can't be unhappy about what someone's doing if you haven't been clear about it. And be clear in how it's shown and how you know it's happening. What are as I said, the expectations? Again, I'm biased, I'm a psychologist, so for us it's very behavioural. And everything we do, we've got it written in behavioural terms, right down to the values. They're translated into behaviours. What does it mean to do it? What does it look like? Know what you reward and reinforce, because the subtle messages count. You know, the people who get thanked at meetings, what do they get thanked for? The people who get acknowledged, the people who win awards. We do, for our sales companies globally, we do annual awards as well as awards throughout the year. And of course we do Deal of the Year, we do Sales Leader of the Year, Sales Team of the Year. But we don't just link it to the profit or margin or new business or volume or whatever. We talk about the how. how did this sales leader engage their team to get to the result they got? That's what people win it on. And we also have, awards that are, they're called the People's Awards, where their teammates vote for them. And we have criteria around that again. So people are really clear. It's not just, oh, well, thanks, Jeff, I like Jeff, and Jeff likes me, and we get along well, so I'll vote. It's really clear, what are people voting for? Be clear in what you do, because even when you think no one's looking, people are looking. And you'd be surprised what people pick up on. Because, of course, what people think in organisations is a culture program is formal. Yes, of course, we structure it, it is a concerted effort. But it's what comes through underneath. You can have all the best programs in the world, but if people are talking about different stories or doing different things underneath, it gets undone, because that's what people really listen to. They think that's the truth. And then, as I said, listen to what people are saying. When I just had all of my global HR managers in, and I say to them that not only are they the corporate conscience, if you know what I mean by that, but I expect them to have their ear to the ground. If they don't know what's going on, I don't think they're doing their job. They should have enough connection in the workplace that they know what's happening. And, again, I know we're videoing this, but we've had examples in our business where we've heard what's going on in some of the business units and the leaders haven't known about it. Now, what that told us is that those people aren't connected enough with their people. And they didn't necessarily have the longest futures. Because to us, it's important that people are connected and listening. So there you are, you've got some lessons to start off with. And I'm sure from the rest of the speakers, you're going to hear lots of other lessons and things to prompt you. So just quickly about the Detmold Group. You can see up here, this is the three daughters, this is Rodney, and this is Alf. It's not his favourite photo, but there it is. So that's them trying to look naturally posed. Did it work? And I've got to say, I don't think any of them like it very much, but that's the new official photo. And that's actually taken at SAMRI, if you wondered where that is, because we're one of the founding ambassadors for SAMRI. And this is what I mean. This is what we look like. We're a manufacturing facility. So a lot of what we do it. We don't spend a lot of money on consultants or significant change programs. We do it. And this is just some of our products here with Paper Pack. We're just doing a big deal with Uber Eats at the moment. And so, as I said, we're accelerating. And I'll show you the spread of manufacturing and where we're located. Because you can see that the red dots are sales and the blue dots are manufacturing. So we've got a high predominance in the Asia, Australia area. And that's because, of course, we have a head office in Adelaide. And we actually want to be relatively close to where our businesses are. But we still have a big spread. We have a presence in America, presence in Europe. We've got a joint venture down in South Africa. Anyone been down to South Africa? Got a business down there? Yeah? Sorry? A couple of us are from there. Yeah. Interesting evolution. Yeah, very interesting evolution, watching what changes there and how your business changes. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so that's us. So 4 continents, 17 countries, 23 cities, 17 currencies. Right? A lot that we have to deal with. And so, when people talk to you about a currency, you go, which one? And people quote a number to you, and sometimes you see all these zeros. And you go, I think that's Indonesia. I think that's rupiah. It's surely not USD, right? You see all these numbers. Philippines and South Africa, of course, we are a food. I was talking to someone from Maggie Beer, there we are, up there. So you'd be familiar with all of the food grade standards, hair nets, protection, etc. Philippines, South Africa, that's Heshan in China. We used to have manufacturing in Shanghai, but we've now had to relocate the majority down to Heshan. And part of that is because of the Chinese government are really strong now on environmental standards, and they wanted manufacturing to move out of Shanghai. So they started out with a standard here, and that got rid of, a certain percentage. Wasn't enough, so they just shifted the standard. That got rid of another percentage, and they went, that's still not enough, so they just put a standard here that you just can't meet. So most people have gone in terms of manufacturing and had to move further out in China. But we employ close to 1,000 people there, and we just did an integration there about 12 months ago. Vietnam, Indonesia. Indonesia, we can have anywhere to up to 1,000 people as well. But we've done some significant restructuring there, and it's interesting when you make those sorts of changes how that impacts your business, and yet we're performing better than ever there. And Vietnam, that's been one of our rapidly growing areas. And you'll have to give me the half time soon, won't you? And if anyone gets bored, just tell me to hurry up and I'll move on to the next topic. Vietnam, so we went to the TET function there because, again, culturally it's really important. They have a big annual, it's like our New Year, but it's a bit later in the year. And so to have members from head office there, we forget that it's important for them to see us there. We don't sort of stand on ceremony. We're not a hierarchical company. And so if, the CEO or I or one of the other members of the exec go, we sort of just go, oh, well, we're coming. And we used to get there and there'd be these big signs, welcome Miss Jenny, welcome Mr. Alf. And it tells you the sort of culture we are, that we'd actually get a bit embarrassed and think, oh, we forgot. Oh, do we really need all of that there? So going to their New Year's is really important. But, Alf stood up there, it would have been about 4 years ago now, and he was quite excited about the growth, and he stood there in front of a room of 200 people and he said, I can guarantee you in 2 years' time there'll be double the number of people sitting in this room. And I went, oh my God. But there are, and so it's a rapidly growing business. But again, remember, we operate in time. So when you're getting that sort of growth happening, how do you make sure that you keep the culture live? And it's in a different country. So how do you keep your corporate culture? Foundation supply partners, we've been with KFC 46 years, McDonald's 37 years. So we've got some really long-standing relationships, and we service some of the largest iconic brands. So we're paper and food packaging, so when you get your takeaway coffee, odds on it's one of ours. If you do, of course, visit those wonderful iconic brands of McDonald's or KFC, you're eating from our food packaging. But we go right down to the corner deli, the corner bakery. And just to give you an idea, please don't ask me to say too many of these. I can say some of them. So Guten Morgen, I can say that one. But, this is what we're dealing with as well. And so again, getting a culture message across, I'm just sort of trying to imply, you've got to be really clear because you're translating it across so many countries and cultures and languages. So the real journey, as I said, began in about 2012. I was there beforehand. I was part of the global sales and marketing. But in 2012, we brought together the two businesses of our global operations and our global sales and marketing. And to me, it's fascinating because we were part of the one umbrella company, same vision, same values, same purpose, same operating principles. Yet if you walked in to the exec meeting of sales and marketing or you walked into an exec meeting of operations, chalk, cheese, or chalk, cheese, whatever way you want to do it, but very different. How they were, the two businesses were dealing with their culture, very different. So in August 2012, essentially it was like a merge. And we ended up with one CEO and one executive team. And so we had to start to think, how are we going to bring these cultures and companies together, even though we've been the one company? Because internally, we used to be competitive. Sales would be out there growing in the front end going, come on ops, keep up. Ops would be saying, those darn salespeople, they don't know our challenges, and it was quite competitive. So how are we going to bridge that gap and bring them together? And so our first question was, well, what is the journey? Where is it that we want to be? Because people thought, but you're the same company, you've got the same vision, all right? So surely you know where you want to be. We had to really define where is it that we want to be. And, this looks like utopia in the centre. And this was probably a little bit more sales-ish. All these opportunities, multiple directions, that was a bit more ops. Okay, we'll take it a bit more slowly. But essentially, we still had people that were just doing this to try and be the vision of being recognised as a leading supplier. So the first thing we actually said, it might sound simplistic, but we said from now on, we are one company. And we truly will have one corporate culture, and we behave as one team. Doesn't mean there's not going to be competitive pressure, but we will behave as one team, and we'll be unified around one concept, and that was the customer. Oh, it's a slightly different setup on this system. Sometimes that happens. So if you see them on different lines, I do apologise, but the customer, okay? So that's what we said had to unify us. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have your customers, what do you have? Right. So we started to say everyone has to think about the customer, but we have to think internally and externally. So we then really did everything revolving around customer. And as I said, that's internal as well. I'm a service provider. Do I have contact with some of our external customers? Well, I'm at a McDonald's supplier forum on Monday, so I have that sort of contact. But internally, my job is to enable the business to deliver to the external customer. So it's about revolving around all of that. And so, as I said, we've got a vision, a purpose, priorities and values. But we had to also think about how did we start to bring that to life? And you can see here with our vision and our purpose, it's about the customer. It's about the customer. And we're saying we want to be recognised as an industry leader. Because, you know, to say we're going to be the best, you know, that's a bit naff, really. So, you know, we want to be recognised as an industry leader. Because we also know that we're never really going to be the biggest supplier because, you know, we're not a Huhtamaki. We're not that size globally. So we had to be realistic around that. And our priorities, QSE. So, you know, again, when we brought the two companies together, QSE used to apply to operations. Quality product, service, DIFOTs, sure you're all familiar with those terms, and efficiency. How do you drive your efficiency in the plant? So that was one of the things we had to get across to sales and corporates. What does it mean to be a quality function? How do you deliver fantastic service? How do you do it in the most efficient way possible? And we then linked it to being what we call a level 1 business. And you would have read about these sorts of concepts. But again, we used this to unify, and we said, we defined it. What does it mean? And then we would talk about, is that what a level 1 business would do? Is that going to deliver a result to the customer? But we defined it about, what does it mean? Okay, the aspiration to be the best, to be the leader. That's the aspiration, not necessarily the vision. Being confident, hitting our targets, staying focused. And, you know, let's just be excellent at what we do. Right? And so people could relate to that. And you can notice in there as well, a level 1, we said the values, people live them, and we have a strong talent pipeline. So we tried to make it inclusive across all elements of the business. And then, of course, our values. And, you know, I'm sure people all hear the bits about you've got to make sure your values come to life. You know, you can't just have a list of values, put them on the wall and hope for the best. And so, you know, we did a whole program around why do we have values? And really got people to understand it's not just a nicety and it's not just something you add to your business. Why do you really have them? About it being guiding principles about how you make your decisions. And we linked it at the personal level. You know, we got people to think, why do you have values? How do your values influence what you do? How does it guide your decisions? That's why we have values in a company. It's a benchmark. It's a recipe. So that I should be able to go into any business globally and I should be able to see the same demonstration of the values. It's the glue that binds you. It's the consistency, and also it helps to provide a common language. Remember how many languages we've got as well? Yet if this is a commonality, again, it's a linking feature. And so we like to link it to the personal and the organisational and to bring it together. And So one of the things that we do is when we run our group induction sessions, and we have people from Australia and internationally coming in, and I run the opening session, and I want to link it into, because people have to connect, remember? They've got to have meaning. They've got to feel the soul of the company. So connect it into why we have values. What does it mean to work here? And so I say to people, why do you think we employed you? All right? We could have had some of our jobs, for example, we just had